And we call that cybersquatting. And that's also people use a lot of things online, and really misuse the World Wide Web and the internet.
Welcome to another episode of Culturally and Technically Legal, the show where we examine the intersections of culture, law, and technology. Today, I'd like to welcome an esteemed guest, Mr. Clyde Vanel. Assemblyman Vanel, we're thrilled to have you. He's an attorney, an entrepreneur, and a pilot from Queens. Assemblyman Vanel chairs the Subcommittee on Internet and New Technology and the Committee on Oversight, Analysis, and Investigation. He's widely recognized for sponsoring bills that address crucial issues from creating of robotic automation to artificial intelligence commissions and so much, much more. He also has helped create cryptocurrency and blockchain study task force, which demonstrates his keen understanding of the evolving technological landscape. With his wealth of experience and expertise, Assemblyman Vanel's contributions to the legal and technological realms are truly, truly commendable. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Assemblyman Vanel. How are you doing today, Mr. Vanel?
Hey Josh, how's it going? Excited to be here, and excited to be on your podcast.
I'm super excited to have you. Obviously, when I understand your history, your impacts on the community, and just everything you've done, I knew I had to have you on to have this conversation. I truly understand that you're somebody who the podcast, reflects from, your intersections of culture, law, and technology, and everything you do. But before we go and dive very deep into the various things that you do and the various roles and hats that you wear, could you kind of briefly share with us a little bit about your journey in becoming an assemblyman and why this role is necessary and important to you?
Well, Josh, look, I'm from Queens. I from a family of immigrant parents. Both my parents are from Haiti. I got, there's 10 of us. So I come from a big family. Went to school, went to college, went to law school, um, um, became an attorney and entrepreneur. But also found out that, there's a lot of ways to help. And we're here to help people. And I think that business is really important, to be able to help people economically. And I think government's very important. And I ran for office, became a New York State Assembly member. And, these are one of the ways that I use my platform to be able to help people, across the state.
Well, that's super important, and I think I agree with that because like we need good politicians, we need good assemblymen, we need people in these spaces who are truly advocating and from the communities and understand what the needs are. To shift gears slightly, not only are you an assemblyman, but you also run your own trademark company. And a few episodes ago, we had Abdul Abdullah in here, and he oversees Afro Future Festival. He's the CEO. And one of the things that happened to him was he did run into these trademarks and copyright issues with another conglomerate festival-based company. I want to know in this world right now where we're seeing, there's more easier ways to become entrepreneur than ever before, right? From jumping on LegalZoom and various other websites, and there's various tech companies popping up left and right, and now you're starting to see where these companies and these entrepreneurs are beginning to not just have businesses in their own country in which they live, but other countries as well. Could you talk to the importance and the significance, of companies really having good trademark structure and copyright infrastructure around their businesses from a legal standpoint?
So Josh, even more fundamental than companies owning their trademarks and copyrights and patents is it's really important for individuals to be able to control your data. That's on one piece. But for you, you are creating content. It's really important. You are creating what we call intellectual property. It's really important to be able to own your intellectual property. Why? For offense and defense. You want to be able to, so you have your podcast. You want to be able to use your podcast. You want to be able to maximize the value of what you're doing and what you're creating. You're doing this to help people to put this information out into the world. Also, you may be able to extract value from the world. You may be able to license your podcast, sell your podcast, sell advertising on your, on your platforms if you want to or not. And you could own, and in order to protect that, there's a couple of things to do to protect that, right? To stop others from taking your stuff. So imagine how long did it take for you to book me on this show? It took some time.
Yes,
You
sir.
had,
Yes,
you
sir.
had to you had to contact my staff. You had to blah blah blah. We had to say yes. I had to vet you and see if it was okay and do all this kind of stuff. You put in work to prepare for this interview, and I'm here now. So imagine, a few years from now, I do something bigger or whatever it is. Imagine this interview is worth something. Imagine people want to pay to see this interview or what have you, or you can use clips for this interview. And imagine I give you permission for that. What if somebody takes the clips, uses it, and sells it without your knowledge? That's not fair for all the work that you put in.
Not at all.
So it's important for you to be able to own the trademark around what you're producing. It's important for you to own the copyrights so that you can stop others from stealing it or taking it from you. That's one, that's defense. Or two, so you can license it and sell it. So
Mm.
that offensively, so that imagine you have a whole bunch of episodes and series that you can sell it and come out. I just saw that I think one of the platforms just paid $100 million to football players that had a podcast to
Wow.
buy
Yes.
their right to buy their catalog and their brand of so intellectual property is important. I say all that to say, really important for people to understand how to create, build, and own their own intellectual property.
Wow, no, I think that's extremely important. You literally just gave an IP lesson that I think many will be able to take and understand. And one of the pieces that I really took from that is being able to protect, your stuff, your IP essentially. Um, to transition briefly, you recently sponsored Assembly Bill A2301, and that essentially works for people to protect themselves in a cyberspace. And what this bill did was it established the crime of larceny for cyber extortion. Can you talk a little bit about your mentality and philosophy and what went into that bill, specifically the process of creating it, and what are some of the goals of a bill like that?
There's something called cybersquatting, where people can go and take johnwalls.com and do whatever and hold on to it and charge you whatever to be able to get your name, to get your .com back. And we call that cyber squatting. And that's also people use a lot of things online, and really misuse the World Wide Web and the internet. We have to make sure that we address that properly. What we found was we find that there are people that take cyber squatting to a different level and go out and people that have really no intention of using a domain name, a using certain type of information online, um, but use it to really extort a person or a company. And we have to make sure that we address that because what we want is, we want a world that is fair online and offline. And we want all people to be able to have um, a worry-free, fraud-free opportunity to build a company, to build a brand, to be able to socialize, and to be able to take advantage of your ideas and your concepts online without people going and extracting that from you.
No, that's important, and I think when we talk about technology and the level of advancements, right, it's created a lot of opportunities for us to succeed in many ways and in many platforms. To your point, and you need protection in this area. Um, we've also seen some ways in which technology has also put us at risk of danger, if you will, right? And as we mentioned about you introducing various bills and introducing new legislation, you also, I'm sure, have to put on a cap of how do you look at these new forms of technologies and examine it from a more futuristic perspective and saying, hey, maybe this one day this could be problematic and how you get in front of these things. And I think when you think about that, I think you were really instrumental in legislation proposals regarding, AI chatbots, ensuring that they're having disclaimer language saying, hey, this may not be factual or as factual as need be, or may not be necessarily guiding you in the purest direction as possible. That's one area. And I think too, something else that I really thought was impactful was your legislation on the weaponization of robots. And for a moment, it felt like, is this Terminator iRobot life coming true? Are we finally here? So could you talk a little bit about those two spaces of AI chatbox disclaimers, as well as us being in this world now with robots, and unfortunately there are people obviously in good ways, right? When you look at these defense organizations, the weaponization of robots, but obviously it could also be problematic when it's in, you know, John Smith's hand to just create weapons on these robots, and it's causing horror and disadvantage throughout the community. Could you talk a little bit about those two pieces of legislation?
So technology is a tool. That's the way I look at it. Technology is a tool, and we have to make sure that we master that tool in whatever manifestation that it's in. There are benefits and costs to different types of technologies, right? And the different levels of, these type of technologies. But my approach is I'm not afraid of technology. I think we need to be able to master and control it because it's really important for us to do so. It's really important. So getting back to the specific bills you're talking about, when, these large language model systems where people are able to use what we call chatbots to be able to have deeper types of searches, really powerful, right? You can come up with better, faster information and outputs from your questions much better, but it's not perfect. So we have to be able to figure out, because there could be some mistakes, what we call hallucinations.
Mm.
A couple of months ago, the one of the chatbots came out and said that a few politicians, I was one of them, did really bad things, and it came out with a news story and it looked real. That's dangerous because if you don't have the disclaimer to say that some of this responses may be wrong, uh, inappropriate, or what have you, you could rely on things that are going to be wrong. So it's important to be able to find that balance. When it comes to robots are really, really important, right? It's really important to be able to have to roboticize many types of tasks that we used to do, and we're going to do more and more of it. But it's really important not to weaponize robots, right? We don't want, we don't, as you stated, we don't want, Terminator,
Sure.
in the streets. We don't want RoboCop in the streets. So the job is, how do I find the proper balance so that we can extract the most benefits from these systems, from these technologies, by minimizing the harms and minimizing the worst harms. So how do we figure out balance that risk? And a lot of these technologies, most of them provide the benefits outweigh the costs, and then how do we mitigate the costs?
No, I agree with you as someone who has the ability to program some of these models and also worked in policy spaces regarding artificial intelligence and digital divides. I think it is important to find that medium of how do we create this opportunity, because as you said, these are resourceful tools, right? And they can really create efficiency, help us in so many ways, shapes, or forms. But to your point, it has to be modeled and used correctly, right? And jumping on to my next point, we talk about tools and we talk about having balance, right? And, various people have their own thoughts or perspectives on who to vote for, why to vote for, right? More so, could you shed a little bit of light on people who may not necessarily think that their vote matters, and kind of share the importance of actually getting out there and voting, whether it be local elections and the presidential election, and also kind of shedding some light on the idea that your vote does matter, even if there is an electoral college vote. It's still important for us to get out there and vote as well. You can kind of break that down a little bit.
In 1924, I wouldn't be able to be the representative of this area. What changed that? Regulations, laws, and processes changed that. 100 years ago, you could not sit in Syracuse University, in the walls of Syracuse University. You could not be an Orangeman. And we're only talking 100 years ago,
Not a long time.
not a long time, right? So 100 years ago, we could not vote. We're talking 100 years ago. So in order for you to, right now, you're doing this podcast, you're recording this, and you're able to do that. You're able to use the internet, which was allowed to be able to start off as a research program with the military, and the government allowed it to move in a certain space. All these are all regulations. These are all regulations. You're wearing eyeglasses. I don't know what your health insurance is, but if you had no health insurance, do you know how much your eye prescription would be with
Couldn't even
no
imagine.
insurance at all?
Couldn't even imagine.
Thousands of dollars. Every prescription lens for them to test your eye. So all of this is government. All of this is government. So no matter what human endeavor that you are in, right, in this country, government affects it. Regulations affect it. No matter where you are. We're talking from the potholes to the streets, to your schools, to if you like sports, if you like sport, government regulations to be able to allow sports on certain days and blah blah blah. And who can you go straight to the league right after high school or not? Can you play during when if you have COVID or not? How much are we going to pay you? How many taxes do you have to pay if you're a ball player? Government regulations. So in almost everything that we do, right, government has a say. Government has a say. There's a reason why some of the richest people in the world are trying to run for office. If you're a billionaire, why do you need to run for office? Right. So if I have to really argue for you to see how important voting is, it to me it's fundamental.
Mm.
And Josh, there was a point where I could not vote. We're only talking about now. Let's talk about this. Voting Rights Act was 1964,
Mm.
right? 60 something years, 60 years ago, 1964, where they didn't want you to vote. And they made it difficult for me to vote. So how could people say that their vote doesn't matter, they shouldn't vote? So that's number one. That's the importance of now voting on voting on local level is really important, right? So to figure out that's really important to figure out right now, Josh, I don't know if you drive. So I'm in Queens, right? And I just saw that I got all these stupid red light tickets. And I'm in politics. And I'm like, yo, how we got all these red light tickets? Right? But that's something that's involved. So we could address that's something that you could address. We
Right.
could these kinds of things. Really important to be able to address these kinds of things to say why is this happening in my local community? Why why can't more trains run? Why can't so really to be able to participate with your government to be able to vote. Because if you don't vote, you don't really have a voice.
Mm.
And that's the importance of these local elections. Now, as far as the Electoral College, it makes a lot of sense. There's the popular vote and then there's the Electoral College. If we only go by majority of the vote, then small states don't count. That means that I don't have to campaign. In order for me to run for president, all I got to do is campaign in New York, California, Texas, Florida. That's a few big states. Michigan, maybe. And then I could ignore Alabama, Georgia, Delaware, Tennessee, Kentucky, da da da. So part of what America did, part of what we did was part of what the Constitution did, and I think what makes a lot of sense. They did um, a proportional representation where you have a little bit of both. You have majority and proportional representation. So our state government and federal government have something like this already. We have Congress and Senate. In Congress, right, you get one congressperson per every 800,000 people.
Okay.
So that's proportional representation, right? One for every 8,000, one for every 800,000. So New York State has 29 congresspeople. Delaware has one. Wyoming has one. So if we just had the House of Representatives, New York, California, Texas could shut everybody, all the small people down. Because if
Mm.
we just got with the few big ones, we could shut the rest of the country down. But there's another house, the Senate. And you know how many senators come from each state? Two. Two senators from each state, no matter how big it is. New York got 19 million people, two senators. Delaware has 1 million, two senators. So even if New York has outsized, much bigger than them in the Congress, the Senate kind of balances it out,
Mm.
right? So every state had the same amount of clout in the Senate. So the Electoral College does something like that for running for president.
Wow. Wow. That was a great explanation. Definitely, I'm sure a lot of people who were on the fence about voting after that, I'm sure they understand the importance of it now. And just, I think really the breakdown of how power is being exercised and executed, I think that's the important, guys. I think knowing is half the battle, right? And there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there that a lot of times, people just take that and run with it. But I think with that breakdown, I think that gives and provides a true understanding. And I know we're almost out of time. So before I let you go, just really want to ask you one more question. A little over a year ago, you ran into some issues because you're also a pilot, right? And we mentioned it earlier, but you ran into some issues in air with your airplane. You had to do an emergency landing on a beach. Could you talk a little bit about what valuable lessons that you learned from that experience, and how that's kind of changed or gave you new perspective on life?
So I was blessed enough to be able to survive that incident. Um, and what I do now, which I know I still fly now, is I train and talk to people about emergency procedures. And for people to be able to take safety seriously, right? Because accidents can happen in cars, planes, automobile, whatever it is. But you have to make sure that you take safety very seriously. And I was, blessed enough to go through the training to be able to go through the process where I was able to find a relatively safe place to land and walk away from that. Um, but you have to make sure that, when you're in an emergency situation, to be able to think, right? Don't panic. Think your way through it.
Wow. Thank you so much, and I think that that advice is transferable in all things, like you said, we do in life, like making sure you're safety and you have resources and you have a plan to ensure your safety, whether it be from a business standpoint, your IP standpoint, when you're looking at politics, and even if you become a pilot one day. So thank you so much for that information and insight that you provided, and all the insight that you provided today. And audience, I really appreciate you guys checking out another episode of Culturally Technically Legal. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Enjoy hearing from Assemblyman Vanel. Obviously, just a lot of insight, a lot of knowledge, and be on the lookout for the next episode. And look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Oh, no
Mr.
problem, Josh.
Vanel. I greatly appreciate it.